this series today in Mark chapter number 9. Mark chapter number 9. Actually, this is not long before Jesus enters into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, which we are going to again celebrate next week. But in Mark chapter 9, we see that this group of people and a few disciples are all hanging out, and they're arguing with each other. And the reason that they're arguing is because the disciples have tried to cast this spirit out of this boy. There's a boy there who is possessed. The disciples have tried and failed. And so now this boy still has this spirit, and this group of people are arguing with the disciples. And it's pretty hilarious because Jesus shows up. And as soon as Jesus shows up, they all stop arguing. It's like, I don't know if you've ever had kids before or seen kids, and it's like as soon as the parent shows up, they stop arguing. Or a teacher shows up or some authority figure shows up, it's like they stop arguing. It's kind of like church, like if churches were arguing about politics and who's more holy and who's more mighty and what church is the best, and then Jesus shows up. We'd all shut up. That's the truth. We'd all be quiet if Jesus showed up, because we realize and understand that the answer is now in the room. The answer is now here. And so this group of people, they're arguing with the disciples about all of this. Jesus shows up. They immediately stop. And it says in Mark chapter 9, verse 17, a man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground, and he foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. And I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." The disciples are like, "Bro, why are you going to put us on blast to Jesus? Why are you going to call us out like that, right? Like tattletales. Snitches get stitches, right? Like, we're going to remember this." And I love it because Jesus doesn't just let them off the hook. He doesn't just say, "Oh, it's okay. It's okay, little disciples. I know you're learning. It's okay." He's so cute. He's like, "Listen." He said, verse 19, "You unbelieving generation, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." So they brought him, and when the spirit saw Jesus, this is where I believe that we should get in our walk with Christ, that we should be so close to Christ that when the enemy sees us, we don't even have to say anything. When he sees us, he knows trouble has shown up. When he sees us, he knows that he can't hold on to what he's been holding on any longer. When he sees us, he starts to get scared instead of bringing fear into the lives of those around us. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" Hold up. This boy is rolling around on the ground. His teeth are gnashing. He's rigid. He's making a scene. And Jesus is so much of a boss that he strikes up a conversation. "So, how long has he been like this? What's the weather like today? What's your favorite dessert? What's your favorite color?" Right? He's just talking to this guy while the son is sitting here rolling. And I have two sons, and if one of them was doing this and Jesus showed up, I would want him to take care of it immediately. Let's get the pleasantries out of the way after the fact. Can we please heal my son? Can we please fix this situation? And I wonder if you've ever had a time where you wanted Jesus to fix the situation when he was really trying to fix you. I wonder if you've ever had a time where Jesus was trying to teach you something through an experience, teach you something through a situation that you were going through, and you couldn't even learn what Jesus wanted you to learn because your focus was only on him fixing the temporary solution, what you could see immediately. Jesus asked the Father, he said, how long has he been like this? How long has he been like this? And the dad says, from childhood. It has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything. Ever been there before? In a situation that was so dire that you didn't even know if Jesus could actually fix it? You ever been in a situation where it was so bad that you didn't even know if Jesus could handle that situation? He says, if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. If you can, said Jesus, everything. Somebody say everything. Type it in the chat if you're watching online. Everything. Everything is possible for the one who believes. And immediately the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. And when Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the impure spirit. You deaf and mute spirit, he said, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. There are so many things that stand out to me in this text. There's the fact that the disciples tried to bring healing to this situation and they could not. There's the fact that everybody's standing around arguing with each other instead of actually doing something productive. There's the fact that the dad says, if you can. There's the fact that Jesus said, everything is possible. There's all of these things that stand out in this text, and I could honestly preach on every single one of them. But the part that I want to really look at today, and the part that I believe God was highlighting this week when I was studying this, is the question that Jesus asked the Father. The question. He said, how long has he been like this? How long has he been like this? And this is a question that I believe would make many of us kind of shake and be a little uneasy if Jesus were to ask us about the situations that we're going through. How long have you been in this situation? How long have you been facing what you're facing? How long has it been like this? That thing, I don't know what that thing is for you. That thing that seems like it's always been this way. That seems like it's been this way for so long. That thing that seems like it's been this way for such a long time, you don't think it could ever change. That thing. Jesus said, how long has he been like this? And the dad said, he's been this way since childhood. In other words, this is not new. This is not a new circumstance. This is not, I woke up today and I found my son like this. He had that moment at one point, but now he says he's been this way since childhood. He is no longer a child. The fact that he said he's been this way since childhood lets us know he's no longer a child. But he says it's been a long time, day in and day out. It's been an ongoing battle. Every day, it's been the same thing. And this morning I woke up and it was the same way that it was years ago when it first started when he was a child. And it feels like it's always been this way. And what I know is that so many of us here, so many of us online, we have things in our lives that we feel we have been battling for forever. We feel like we've been facing the same habits, the same temptations, the same struggles in our family, the same struggles on our job, the same financial struggles, the same spiritual struggles for forever. It's like it's always been like this. Why would I think that it could change now? Why would I have hope that things could get better now? Because it's always been this way. And that's what I want to talk to you this morning as we close out this series, is on that subject. It's always been this way. It's always been this way. Somebody say, it's always been this way. Type in the chat, it's always been this way. It's always been this way. I don't know if you ever ever. I don't know if you ever experienced this. I don't know if you ever had this moment in your life where you realized that the things that you used to make fun of adults doing when you were a child are the things that you now do. Anybody ever had that moment, like the statements and the phrases that people used to say? And it's like, man, I used to get so annoyed when adults would say that, and now it's the very thing that you say yourself. You constantly say the same thing. Like things like, back in my day, right? Parents used to always say this, back in my day. People used to say this, back in my day, or back when I was your age. Gas was a penny a gallon, whatever. And then they'll say, things like, you need to just enjoy your young years because you're going to blink, and before you know it, it's all going to be over. You're going to be older like me, right? They would say things like this all the time. And whenever they would say these kind of things, it would be like, you kind of roll your eyes, right? I think we can all agree, like we kind of roll our eyes whenever parents would say things like this, or adults, teachers, whatever it may be, would say things like this. And they'd say stuff like, all these different sayings, and we'd roll our eyes. Or then parents, right? Parents would say things to the kid. The kid would be like, I don't want to. And the parent would say, I'm not asking. Or as a kid, you would say, well, why do I have to? And the parent would say what? Because I said so. Man, tell me that is not the absolute worst. Because I said so. Or the kid would say, are we there yet? If I had a penny for every time I've heard that, I'd be rich. Kid would say all kinds of things. As a kid, like you would say all these certain things. You would say, stop being so overprotective. And the parent would say, well, one day if you have kids, then you'll understand, right? So they had all these things that they would say. And as I've kind of gotten older myself, I found that I've started to say some of the same things that I used to get annoyed about. And I've started to kind of act some of the same ways that I used to get annoyed about. And there's certain things that I've picked up that I used to get annoyed about. Anybody can relate to that? Like when you were younger, you were like, this is ridiculous. But now that you're older, you're like, wow, I'm saying the exact same stuff. And it's even gotten worse since I've become a dad. I'm hungry. Hi, hungry, I'm dad. Right? Like, it's like, what does that even mean? Like, why did I say that? I don't even know why I said it. It just happened. And it's gotten worse since becoming a dad. Like it's kind of a rite of passage as a parent to have these dad jokes and these dad colloquialisms and these things that you constantly are saying. And the reality is nobody wants to admit that they're older. Nobody wants to admit that. Nobody wants to acknowledge that. We don't want other people to acknowledge it, but the truth is we admit it to ourselves. Right? Like we know within ourselves, we're like, okay, I'm older now. Like I'm saying some of the things. It's like it's the State Farm commercials or the Allstate save you from being your dad or whatever, or save you from being your parent. I don't know, the commercial where it's like young folks and they're all dressed up like their dad and all this kind of stuff. And that's really kind of what it is. You just start to look and you're like, I'm getting old. Not saying my parents are old, but like you just start to think like, I'm getting older. Is that better? I'm getting older. You start to realize this, and you have all these sayings and all these things that you say and these colloquialisms and all these terms, but I didn't even really realize how much I was there until a few nights ago, because I find that one of the things I like to say the most to our kids is, that's enough, right? That's enough. My dads, I think you can relate. That's enough. Like, that's it. Like, that's enough. Like, no more, right? And this is what you say whenever there's the moments of your kid is kind of crying for no reason, or you find that your kid is whining for no reason, or you find that your kid is arguing or doing something they're not supposed to, and then finally, as a dad, you step in and you're like, that's enough. That's enough. And I didn't even realize how much of a problem this was for me and how much I said it until a few weeks ago. I'm just getting things ready for the next day, kind of picking my clothes out or whatever, and I hear Elijah, our youngest, is like kind of yelling and making noises because he's 18 months, so he's just learned how to talk a few months ago, so he just talks nonstop. And Judah was trying to watch this show called Booba. Judah is our 3-year-old. He's trying to watch a show called Booba. Now, if you don't know what Booba is, God bless you. Don't look it up. It's the worst, most annoying show ever. They don't talk. It's just like, like just making noises. It's not fun. And now on Netflix, they came out with season 3, and they're only 4 minutes long per episode. And at the end of every episode, Judah knows what's new and what's old. He knows if it's on the new booba or if it's from season 2. And he doesn't want to watch season 2. He only wants to watch season 3. But Netflix got jokes because they will skip around. So after one episode of season 3, it automatically goes to season 2 and plays 1. And Judah's just like, no, this isn't. So booba is on my no-no list. Like, I don't do booba. I'm trying to steer him in another direction. But he was watching booba, and Elijah's making all this noise, and all of a sudden, I hear Judah, our 3-year-old, go, "That's enough, Eli." And Eli just keeps making sounds, and Judah goes, "I said, that's enough, Elijah David Barker." He's going to be like his dad before he even becomes a teenager. It's amazing. But he is the old soul. But he said to Elijah, he said, "That's enough. That's enough." And the thing is, that's where I believe God wants us to get when it comes to the things that we're facing and experiencing in our lives, these supernatural battles, these things that we are constantly fighting over and over and over again. I believe God wants us to get to the place where we say, "That's enough. That's enough." It said in verse 21, Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," he answered. Jesus said, "How long has he been like this?" The dad's like, "Since childhood." He's been this way since childhood. This isn't new. This did not just happen. This is not a new occurrence. This has been a day in and day out thing. It has been this way for as long as I can remember, since childhood. So we're able to see that he's no longer a child, but he's still doing what was once going on in childhood. And for the dad, he had to feel like, here we go again. It's another day, and it's the same thing that we've been facing. Day in and day out. He's been this way since childhood. And when that is the case, we can kind of become accustomed to that being the way that it is. Whenever that's the case, we can kind of get to the point where we feel like it's always been this way. It's never going to change. Why would I expect for it to change? Why would I expect for it to get better? And this is why I believe Jesus asked him, "How long has he been like this?" I don't think it's because Jesus didn't know, because this is Jesus. Jesus knows everything. Jesus knew how long he had been this way. He knew how long this situation had been going. It's Jesus. I don't believe Jesus was asking him how long he had been this way because he just wanted to have a conversation. I believe that every word and every action that Jesus took place on this earth was for a purpose because his time was limited. So why did Jesus ask him, how long has he been this way? Could it be that he was wanting the father to acknowledge it? Could it be that he wanted the dad to remember how long it had been? Could it be that he wanted the dad to acknowledge how long it had been, to realize how tired he was of facing the same thing over and over and over again? Could it be that he wanted him to acknowledge and understand that I'm tired of facing the same struggle? I am tired of going through the same thing. Because see, for many of us, we have put up with stuff for so long. We've put up with it for so long that we're at a point now where we don't even realize that it's been this way for as long as it's been. And many times it is not until we look back that we realize how long it has actually been. Until we look back that we realize and understand how long we've been enduring this thing. And before we know it, we look back and we've been putting up with it for 5 years. We've been putting up with it for 10 years, 20 years, if you're not careful, 30 years. And we just kept putting up with it and kept putting up with it because we didn't take the time to understand and to look back, and we've just become accustomed to it. Anybody ever had something in your life that you just became used to living with? Like you just became used to it. Didn't even bother you anymore. It bothers other people. And then you hear somebody else talking about it, and you're like, oh, you know what? That used to bother me too. It doesn't bother me anymore because I'm just used to it. We just put up with the same thing over and over and over again. And if we're keeping it like 100 today, many of us have settled. We've settled. I haven't settled. Maybe not. But maybe. Many of us, we've settled. If we were to take an honest look at our lives, if we were to take an honest look at our circumstances, if we were to take an honest look at our surroundings with an honest and open heart, we would admit, I've settled. I've settled. We used to fight. I used to fight for that thing, but now I've settled. I used to fight against that, but now I've settled, and I've become used to it, and I've become comfortable with it, and it's okay with me now, and I just deal with it. I've settled. We used to fight for our marriage, but now, 20 years in, it is what it is. We used to fight for our peace, but now we've been in disarray for so long that it is what it is. We used to fight for wisdom, but now it is what it is. We used to fight, but now we've just kind of settled. We've come into this place where it is what it is. We used to fight for our children, but now it is what it is. And Jesus, he says to the dad, he says, hey, how long has he been like this? How long has it been this way? How long have you been facing this with your son? How long has he been going through this situation? Because sometimes we have to stop and think, how long has it really been? And how long am I going to continue to put up with it? How long am I going to continue to deal with it? How long am I going to continue to just let it continue to go? Because the longer you let something go, the more difficult it is to reel it back. The longer you let the enemy get a foothold in that area of your life, the more difficult it will be to get rid of him. God is asking, how long? How long am I going to put up with this thing that I've been facing? And this is a difficult message for me even to preach because there's so many things in my life that I've just allowed to keep happening. So many things that I know it doesn't need to be that way. I know there needs to be change. I know I need to work on that. I know I need to make sure they work on that. But it's tiring and I'm used to it and it is what it is. But Jesus said, no, I don't want it to stay that way. Just because it is that way doesn't mean it has to be that way. Just because it's that way right now doesn't mean it has to stay that way. Just because they're acting up doesn't mean it has to stay that way. Just because you're struggling with that temptation doesn't mean it has to stay that way. Just because you can't get over your habit doesn't mean it has to stay that way. Jesus asked the dad, he said, how long has he been like this? And I wonder if we were to take the time today and to actually examine our own hearts instead of trying to examine our neighbors. If we would be honest to say there are things that I have allowed to go on in my life that I know God can heal and wants to heal. How long has the bitterness been like this? How long has the unforgiveness been like this? How long has the anger been like this? 10 years, 20 years? Still haven't forgiven a parent? Still haven't forgiven the person that dumped you, that said that they'd be there for the rest of your life? And we carry it with us, and Jesus is like, how long are you going to continue to put up with this thing? How long are you going to continue to allow this to go on? Because despite the lie from the enemy trying to tell you that it's always been this way, it'll always be this way, and it can never change, the truth is there is always a chance. There's always a chance. That's the next thing I need you to write down today is there's always a chance. Type it in the chat. There's always a chance. Somebody say there's always a chance. See, when y'all are quiet on a Sunday morning, I got to get you talking. One more time. Somebody say there's always a chance. This dad is desperate to see his son healed. He's desperate for it. He is just hoping that there is an inkling of a chance that his son can be healed. He is hoping against hope that there is just enough of a chance that Jesus can do something. And he says, Jesus, if you can. If you can. And Jesus responds in verse 23, if you can, everything is possible for the one who believes. If you can. See, some of us need to remove if from the equation. We just need to begin to say, God, you can. Not God, if you can, help my marriage. God, if you can, help my children. Not God, if you can, help my anxiety. God, you can. God, you can. Not God, if you can, but God, you can restore my marriage. Not God, if you can help me grow in wisdom, but God, you can help me grow in wisdom. Not God, if you can help me overcome that habit, but God, you can help me overcome that habit. What would happen if we shifted the way that we spoke about God? What if instead of making it a question to an answer that he's already answered, where he said everything is possible, what if instead of continuing to question, we just begin to speak the answer that he said? Jesus, you can. I know it doesn't seem like it. I know it hasn't changed right now. I know it's been this way for a long time. But Jesus, you can bring healing. Jesus, you can. There is something freeing when we begin to acknowledge, I can't, but he can. I can't, but Jesus can. I don't know how to, but Jesus can. They don't know how to, but Jesus does. I'm not going to figure it out, but Jesus will. Jesus said, if I can, everything is possible. Everything. Everything. Not just some things, not just the easy things, not just the big things, not the little things. Everything is possible, but there's a catch. Because there's always a catch. He said, everything is possible for the one who believes. For the one who believes. Not the one who looks the best, not the one who's been in church the longest, not the one who prays the loudest, not the one who looks like they have their act together, but the one who believes. Everything is possible for the one who believes. See, it was the same situation for this dad as I believe it is for so many of us. This dad was going through the same thing that I believe so many of us are struggling with. And that is that for him, it was a mixed bag. It was a mixed bag. And that's the last thing I want you to see is it's a mixed bag sometimes. And what I mean by that is we say that we believe, but we don't. We say that we believe, and we do for a moment, but then also we don't. This dad, he said, I do believe, but help me with my unbelief. Verse 24, immediately the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe, help me overcome my unbelief. Isn't this where most of us live? Isn't this where most of us hang out? We do believe, but then we don't. We want to believe, but we've seen so much. So much. Some of us have seen way too much. So many things, the opposite of what we believe. A lot of times, people in church, they grow up in church, they go to church, it's what they've always done, it's what they've always known, and then they get 30 years in church, and they don't even know why they believe what they believe, and something hits them so hard that they don't even know how they can continue to believe. Because if you just go to church because somebody else told you to instead of understanding why, if you just serve Jesus because somebody else told you to instead of understanding why, if you just say that you believe what God said instead of understanding why, then when the moment comes that you have to answer that thing for yourself, you're not going to be ready. So many of us, we say that we believe, but we don't. And we want to believe, but we've seen too much. We've seen too much. We've seen so many things. But hear me, the only thing worse then admitting you don't believe is thinking that you do without realizing you don't. It is far better for you to be like this dad and say, hey, I want to believe, so can you help me in my unbelief because I don't really believe? It is far better to be honest like that than to just say, I believe, I believe, I believe, I believe, and inside be like, it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen, I don't believe, I don't believe, I don't believe. If you're so concerned about what people hear you say instead of the truth, then it will always hold us back. It is so much better, hear me, it is so much better to just admit, hey, God, I'm struggling to believe here, than to think that you do without realizing that you don't. People say all the time, I can't believe that this dad would admit that he does not believe. I can't believe that this dad would look at Jesus in the face and say, I do believe, but I don't believe. Help me with my unbelief. But I respect the guy. Because, see, I grew up in church. Been in church literally since I was born. And I respect the guy because he was willing to admit what so many of us fail to acknowledge. He was willing to admit what is so true for so many followers of Jesus that we never admit. He said, I did believe. And we're like, I did believe until I saw a reason not to, until I heard a reason not to, until I felt a reason not to. And it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag. You know what I mean? Like, it's this one day and it's that the next. And we kind of go back and forth. And it's like, it's a mixture of all these things. Makes me think of the bags of candy that you can get, right? Around like Halloween time and around like Valentine's Day and all those kind of things. You can probably go anytime and get those bags of candy that it's like a mixture of different candies, right? So if you get the chocolate one, it may have like Snickers and all those kind of things in there, and you reach in the bag. And for me, whenever I reach into a bag of candy, I know in my heart what I want to pull out. Anybody ever like put your hand in a bag of candy and you have your mind set on something and you reach in there and you pull out the wrong thing and it's something and it's like a bag that's not yours and you're like, do I go back in? Because somebody was being nice and they're like, hey, here's a bag of candy. And you're like, do I go back again for seconds and get what I actually want? Do I just say thank you and give this to my kid? Like, what do I do? So that's me. Like, whenever I reach into the bag of candy, I want to pull out a Snickers. When I reach into the bag of those chocolate candies, I want to pull out a Snickers. That's what I want. And whenever I pull out a Snickers, guess what? I'm happy. I'm happy because I don't know how you are, but don't mess with my food. Right? Like, don't mess with my stomach. If I'm going in for something, if I'm expecting something, I want it to be what it is. The other day, I thought that I was dipping my taco. We had these Easy Plate or Taste Plate or I don't know, one of these like things where they send you the food. Somebody got us a free like 3-day trial or 3-meal trial. And I thought that I was putting my taco into sour cream and I took a bite of it and it was mayonnaise. And I was like, mad, right? Like, not like, oh man, I was mad. I was like, what in the world? Like, like this is awful. And so I told Nicole, I was like, I don't want to continue like that 3-day trial. That's all I want. I said, I'd much rather have your cooking. I earned brownie points on that, but it was also true. I'm like, I don't want this nastiness. I don't know why they're trying to get creative. You give me a taco, what do I put it in? Sour cream. Who puts tacos in mayonnaise? Nobody. Except for Every Plate or what Taste a Plate or whatever it is. I don't know. So don't mess with my food. That's all I'm trying to say. And so whenever I reach in, I want a Snickers. And when I get a Snickers, I'm happy. And I love the bag. Love the bag of candy. I'm going to go back and get more. But when I put my hand into there and I pull out the nasty ones, like a Three Musketeers, or a Milky Way, or a Twix, then I don't like the bag. Now, see, some of y'all judging me because you like those things. That's great. You put your hand in there, you pull out a Twix, you be happy. When I pull out a Twix, I'm not happy. Right? I get upset, and I don't like the bag. And when it gets to the point where I've eaten all the Snickers, I just want to give the whole bag away because I don't want anything that's in the bag. But as long as I pull out what I want, I'm happy. When I pull out what I don't want, I'm not. And so many of us, that's how we are with our faith and with our belief. When we put our hand into our prayer bag and we pull out exactly what we want, we're happy. God, help it to be good. Help it to be what I want. We look at it and it's like, nope. God, help it to be good. And as long as we pull out what we want, as long as God brings immediate healing, as long as God brings immediate deliverance, as long as God brings exactly what we wanted for our life in that moment, then we're happy. But the moment we reach in the bag and we pull out a candy bar that says, wait 3 years, or we go in the bag and we pull out a candy bar that says, in that relationship, or we go in the bag and we pull out a candy bar that says, continue to trust me. We're like, God, what are you doing? And as long as we pull out what we want, we believe God's word. But the moment we go 2, 3, 4, 5 times into the bag and we're not pulling out what we want, then our belief starts to struggle and starts to dwindle. Because our belief was not in who God is, it was in what we wanted God to do for us. And so it's a mixed bag. This dad's like, listen, I do believe, but I'm struggling to believe because of what I've been seeing for all this time. And we end up like this in our lives, like, Jesus, I want to believe. I want to trust. I want to know that you're going to do it. I want to believe. But God, I'm looking at my life and I'm not where I thought that I would be. I'm not where I want to be right now. I'm looking at my life and it's the same now as it's always been. It's the same now as it was a year ago. It's the same now as it was 5 years ago. It's the same now as it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I'm facing the same struggle now that I've been facing all this time. God, I want to believe, but I'm struggling because I keep seeing the same thing over and over and over again. The father's like, listen, I want my son to be healed. And he's still not healed. He's still possessed. He's still struggling with this. But the father knew that the only way his son could overcome the possession was for the father to overcome his unbelief. And the only way he could overcome his unbelief was to admit that he had unbelief. To acknowledge that he had unbelief. Because you cannot overcome what is holding you. You cannot overcome what is attacking you. You cannot overcome what you're going through until you first overcome the unbelief that's been holding you. Just because it's always been this way doesn't mean that it has to stay this way. Just because it's always been this way, it doesn't mean that it'll always be that way. Just because you've been facing the same thing over and over and over again for years, it doesn't mean it can't change. And God is waiting on us to say, Jesus, I believe you can do it. I believe that you can do it. It doesn't look like it. It's been a long time, but I believe you can do it. Anybody today that says, God, I believe you can do it. That thing that it's been waiting on, that thing that I've been hoping for, that thing that it seems like it's never going to happen. God, I believe that you can do it. And sorry, Satan, but today I'm not giving in to the unbelief. I'm not quitting believing. I'm not stopping trusting. I'm not stopping being full of hope, but I'm going to continue to believe that even though it's always been this way, God is still faithful. Even though it's always been this way, God is still able. And he can show up now. He can show up tomorrow. He can show up 5 years from now. He can show up at any point and completely change this thing. And my belief is not swayed by how it looks. My belief is not swayed by my emotions. My belief is not swayed by my feelings, but my belief is trusting in God no matter what it looks like, no matter if it's easy or if it's hard, if it's on my time or if it's on his time, I'm going to trust anyways. Sure, it's always been this way, but it's not going to stay this way. It's not going to stay this way.